Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode on Spicy Spectrum. Sorry, it's not Spicy Spectrum anymore. We decided to change it to Wasted Wanderers. Um, and yeah, welcome to a new podcast, Wasted Wanderers. How you doing, Abhijit?
Hi everyone, nice to be seeing everybody again. What we realized was as soon as we changed the name, or as soon as we started doing this weekly live with this new name, Wasted Wanderers, it seems to be sticking more with our audience. So we have decided to basically just have a pretty much of a rebranding exercise. And now our channel will itself be called Wasted Wanderers. Um, it denotes our reality. That's what happens every Friday night, and then we show up on Saturday. So obviously, we don't do this when we drive, but we do. But we do try sometimes when we have to do this live session. Anyways, guys, all jokes aside, our new name is, and the new name for the channel is the name for the show itself. And yeah, we will keep pretty much the same format, but thank you for giving us all the love that we have been receiving so far. Please continue to do so. Please like, share, subscribe, and yeah, keep spreading the good news. Again, I think we have three topics depending on how you count. And yeah, without, I guess, no surprises, we will discuss the tariffs. And then we're trying to bring you guys a little bit of a different flavor from India. And then we'll talk about the tech world a little bit, not necessarily just IT and what happened at OpenAI. You can go look at normal news outlets for all of that good stuff. You can always count on us to bring out something that is a little bit off the beaten road. So, yeah, hope you guys are having a great weekend, and let's dive right into it. Let me pull up the first one for the day. There we go.
Okay. So, yeah, I can start off with this. So, looks like the Trump tariff that we've been hearing about all year has been striked as not legal by the Supreme Court. So, this is a big blow to the Trump administration because they were using a very narrow law or like a clause in the constitution to put these in place for the different countries, right? So on some countries it was 10%, on some countries it was 15. I remember at a time India was at 50%. So the administration could do this because they said this is because of an emergency. So that was the clause. And so Trump took full advantage of it. But looks like the Supreme Court finally ruled on it and they said it's not legal for Trump to do that. And we can talk about what Trump administration did next, but this is basically the gist of it. Uh, then what happened is now the Trump is not going to sit around. He was already ready with his next weapon, which was another clause in the Constitution that allows for a single tariff to be put in place for all countries, kind of. So he selected 15%. So that is now in effect because I feel the other tariffs are going away. So there's going to be lawsuits as to, okay, now you collected so much tariff money. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to refund it or not? So there's talk about that. But meanwhile, this 15% tariff stays in place for another, I think in the article it's written maybe somewhere like 120, 150 days. Because according to the clause that Donald Trump selected, this can be put in place for 150 days only. So that's like the gist. Yeah, Abhijit, any thoughts on this?
I mean, for anyone, first things, I mean, this is just the way as someone who's looking from the outside in, there's a couple of things which are pretty. I'm pretty convinced. Like, this is my opinion, but I also think this is a very. It's basically coming from some sort of experience and following these type of stories, right? Regardless of which government, which flavor of administration you have in the US, tariffs will stay. Point number one, which no matter what, it doesn't. From an outsider perspective, to me, it doesn't matter what clause of the U.S. Constitution matters and which one doesn't matter when it comes to tariffs. I'm only concerned about the fact that, or I'm only concerned about whether there are tariffs or not. My hypothesis is they will stay. There are enough laws, clauses, paragraphs in the uh, US legalese that will more or less enable these, right? And that's why you have the president coming out and say we'll just keep finding more and more legal ways to keep these running. Point number one. Point number two, I don't think the tariff policy will change hypothetically, even if one, the Republicans were to lose in the midterms, two, even if after 4 years you see the Democrats coming back, or after I guess 3 odd years now, even if you see the Democrats coming back, I don't think they're going to change that policy. The simple reason for that is US wants to reduce its debt. That is the number that we all need to be looking at. 38, 36 trillion, whatever that sits at today, I'm not sure. It's somewhere in that ballpark. If the US has to pay it out, they just need more money. And to that end, the tariffs will continue to play a role because, as we have all seen, government downsizing is not as straightforward as it was touted with, the starting of the Doge, uh, whatever that Department of Government Efficiency. It played its role. I don't know what it's up to these days, because the two big pillars of that department are basically gone. Vivek
Yeah.
Ramaswamy and then Musk subsequently, right? So, from an outsider looking in, to me, these are US details. And they'll keep figuring those out as we go along. What we need to be looking at is the volatility that comes with this. Today, your tariff is 25%, tomorrow, it'll be capped at 15%. Then it may go away for like 2-3 months because, as this article says, right, up to, and as JD was mentioning, 150 days. And then the new way apparently to put tariffs, it requires a lot more discussion. At this point, I don't think that discussion will be as extensive. It'll just be okay, we need to bring them back. There will be some more um, there will be more news cycle related articles coming out, but eventually the tariffs will be back. So the variability will be on what level of tariffs a country is facing, rather than, I don't think there is a scenario of zero tariffs. I just don't see that. I actually don't even see that even with a Democrat government in place. Because the one thing we have noticed is, for all the for all the for all the news that gets generated, there is actually pretty striking policy consistency in the US. Once something major happens on this scale, presidents usually stick with it. Only the minor things get changed back and forth, right? Oh, there'll be the next president, whoever it is, especially if it's a Democrat president, he will on day one sit in his or her office and sign a bunch of executive orders, and there'll be a big news on it. But none of them, I'm almost certain, will roll back tariffs, because I think at this point there is wide consensus that tariffs are needed to bring down the national debt. Till that number doesn't start going down, till we don't see the US coming into, let's say, 40-50% range of GDP, debt to GDP ratio, I don't see the tariffs going away in any way whatsoever, because they just cannot. There is no other way to generate income. There are ways to reduce costs, which will probably keep happening in the background, but that's going to be just a lot slower than just putting tariffs, simply because whenever you want to cut down a government expense, you have to just convince a lot of people that that's a good thing. That usually either takes a long time or doesn't end up happening. So that's my take on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. One thing I would like to add is you're right. Like, how do you decrease the national debt, right? Either through raising taxes or through growing economy, right? Now, US as a major developed economy can't grow, for example, as much as India. And taxes are not very popular in the US. So this is just a tax, but in another form. It's a tax on consumption, right? So I think this is a good thing. And another reason why I think tariffs are not going away is because Trump has found out that this is a good way to use as a bargaining chip. So he knows that the US consumer is the biggest consumer in the world, and to access this market, other countries have to play fair with the Trump. He's basically acting as a bodyguard to US consumer. But I would love to know, Abhijit, like, what is the impact of all this in Canada, like, since you're in Canada?
So let me pull up our second, I guess, related story, right? This is a column in Toronto Sun. So it basically says Trump's court loss on tariffs doesn't mean much for Canada. That's largely true. So the tariffs that have been struck down are all, or they were all placed under IEEPA. It's an emergency economic act in the US, which the Trump administration was using to justify tariffs. The Supreme Court ruling says that tariffs under IEEPA are not allowed. But none of the tariffs on Canada were under IEEPA tariff bucket anyway. So all the tariffs on Canadian products, which is lumber, assembled vehicles, and steel and aluminum, they will still basically remain in place.
Interesting.
But the other side of this story is that most of the Canadian exports to US are not being tariffed anyway right now because of something called CUSMA or NAFTA, whichever way you call that. The pivotal negotiation for Canada in 2026 will be the renegotiation of the CUSMA deal, which is coming up in, I think, June or July. I could be wrong about the month, but I know it's happening in one of those 2 months, right? That is what will decide the trade relationship between Canada and US. In my opinion, as I was mentioning earlier, for the foreseeable future. Just because the Trump administration goes away doesn't mean whatever is renegotiated goes away. That deal will get renegotiated every 4 years, because those are the terms of that deal. But the second thing is, it will get stricter and stricter for Canada. That's the way I look at it, right? And that's why we are seeing so much activity on the Canadian diplomatic front, going to India, trying to get a deal done. I think Canada is now negotiating a deal with Mexico independently of the US. I think I'm not sure, but I'm pretty. But my hunch is now the trade talks with the UK that fell apart a couple of years ago, a few years ago under the Trudeau administration, those will be back on, and Canada will probably back down on its dairy nonsense. Like, on a side note, like this is such a mediocre cartel to even have. Like, there's a dairy cartel in Canada, man. How insulated are we from the world? There's a bloody dairy cartel. Like, this is the last thing I would expect a cartel to even exist on. Anyways, I guess if you look at the definition, you can have a cartel for anything. Freaking hell, dairy out of everything. Anyway,
Well, you have cartel for the maple syrup also. Don't forget that.
I mean, maple syrup, fine, but at least we produce that much and then we sell it to the world. Fine, the world likes our maple syrup. I'm okay with that. But seriously, like milk, cheese? How do you? Oh, anyway, that's like a barrel of worms I don't want to open today. So, but I have a feeling that, in all seriousness, trade talks with Europe will start in all earnestness pretty quickly. Right now, I think the focus of the Canadian government is mending relations with India because, well, India needs a ton of uranium. Canada has a ton of uranium, and they're like, yeah, you want it, we'll give it to you. The other item that Canada can export to India is lentils because Indians have a very lentil heavy diet. In again under the Trudeau administration, a lot of that moved to Australia. Maybe Canada will try to renegotiate that piece, right? And internally within Canada, we are seeing energy related projects being green lighted quite quickly from a Canadian perspective. Like my basis is the is the last few years where everything had basically come to a halt. It's at least now moving, right? So again, the all this 10%, 15% US court ruling, I'm in agreement with the with this headline that it doesn't really mean much for Canada. The negotiation at the CUSMA table or at the NAFTA table is what will be the deciding factor. JD, your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel the CUSMA negotiation is going to be a big story between Canada and US this year. So we should closely follow that. Um, yeah, in terms of how US looks at it, see, like Trump has all these tools under his belt to do what his agenda is, right? To act as that club bouncer. So he will use every tool in his power. He's going to litigate as much as possible. So, of course, yeah, the tariffs are not going away. So, I feel because this tariff is only available for 150 days, then he's going to come out with another arrow in his arsenal, and then he's going to shoot that. And then when that gets over, then another one. Now, people have to realize this is not something that Trump figured out that no other president has figured out. The truth is, US president has a lot of power in general. The as compared to other countries, for example, even in Canada or India, where you kind of rule with the majority, with the party. It's more of like a parliamentary system, and like the prime minister is the head. In the US, the president is the head. He has unilateral power over a lot of stuff, and the only way to stop him is through Supreme Court, and that's what the Supreme Court did. But again, that doesn't mean he's stopping. So I think this is going to go on for a while now.
All right, guys, we will let President Trump and his team, you know, have their cup of tea with the Supreme Court on tariffs while we move on to something very, let's look at some happy stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, here is this BBC article. This came out 2 days ago. The billions given to charity by ordinary Indians every year. See, I'll give a macro picture. Whenever I see BBC and New York Times saying positive things about India, I'm almost crouching in a corner and be like, okay, let's peel the onion and see why. Why are they talking positive about India? Like I'm like, okay, what did we do right or what did we do wrong? See, I agree with most of the things that are written in this article, right? They talk about how even the lower strata of Indians, who are earning 4,000, 5,000 rupees a month, even they do some sort of charity activities. And 68% respondents in this survey give in some form. 48% is in kind, which is food, clothing, household goods. Cash donations 44%, volunteering 30%. And a lot of it goes to sort of trustworthy religious institutions. If anyone's ever visited India, you have gone to these big temples or gurdwaras, you will see it's called langar in Hindi or Punjabi. And that's basically food service and available to all. It's not a Gordon Ramsay type of gourmet meal, but it's a simple meal offered to everyone completely for free, right? And that's been a tradition for a very, very long time. Actually, not when I say very, very long time, that's just been a part of the, I would almost say, at least if we assume Indian civilization is like 5,500 years old, then I would say this tradition has existed for at least 3,000 of those, right? All documented Indian history has some form of free meal services. So long back, like if you read all the scriptures and mythological stories and stuff, you will see um, a lot of the priests, the what we call Brahmins, if they are focused on internal development, they would, as a part of tradition, go around and literally uh, ask for food from all the other households, and households would just give them food. Like there was that trust based contract in society that, okay, here is a person who is focused on internal spiritual growth. They're focused on that path. They don't have time to go earn, do a business or whatever. So we will give them food, right? And in some form or the other, this tradition has kept up. Now, I do want to point out that, okay, the $6 billion of giving annually, which is the India's total household giving per year. See, the fact of the matter is, it's just because of a lower cost of living, which allows for a higher disposable income, which then allows people to give. Yes, some of it is just bottom up society driven. If someone is earning 4,000, 5,000 rupees, let's go down to that section, right? Yeah. Yet, giving is not confined to the affluent, even at low consumption levels. About half of households report giving. As incomes rise, participation climbs to 70 to 80%. So, some of this is ingrained in society, but some of this is simply because other stuff is cheaper, we can afford to give. I think it's a mix of both. Now, this article goes on to also mention that, okay, in the West, most of the giving or charity happens through formal, not for profit organizations, and that has seen a decrease. And then there is a bunch of giving that happens which is not through formal channels, but there's no record of that, right? Personally, if you give through a not for profit organization, the organization itself has to keep running. So, how much of the money you give or the donation you make actually reaches the people, we don't know. So, typically, my MO is I will, if I go to a thrift store or if I go to any other place where I'll donate like hard goods, clothes, food items, or fruits or whatever I have, rather than giving cash, because a a downright cash donation, I just don't know how much will actually reach the people in need, right? And the same thing in India. If I'm doing any giving exercise in India, I'll try to give in hard product, in kind, rather than cash, just because that way I know that it is going to end up with someone in need. JD, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, this story really made me think about my background and my childhood. So I remember even when I was young, my parents would go to temples and these other places and would donate a lot, their time, their money on charity. Uh, and yeah, like this has been kind of like a informal tradition in the Indian society, at least when I was there, and I think there still is. uh, and this story really highlights like generosity of Indians, and even like other places in Southeast Asia who are more family bound, in developing countries, that unlike the West, where charity is more formal, where you could spin up a tax exempt charity based on some IRS rules, and then you have to, claim your expenses and your earnings, but you don't pay taxes on it. A lot of churches do this. um, it's not like that culture over here in developing countries like India. It's much more informal. So there's no tax deductions. It's not organized. It just happens, as you said, Abhijit, like in small bits by people from all backgrounds, like poor or rich, the middle class and lower class people, uh, by I'm not saying lower class uh, by status, but by economic impact. They donate, yeah, mostly in cash, or if they give out their home goods, things like that. The mostly richer people economically in India, they do these big outreaches, these food programs, drives, using something called NGOs, so non-government organizations. So they do that. There's also like religious NGOs, like both Hindu, and even like Christian. They do a lot of outreach. So yeah, but these are mostly funded by like big donations, as opposed to the informal one that we're talking about here, which is, amounts to $6 billion a year. That's a crazy amount of money if you think about it,
Right.
But that's the thing, like there are a billion Indians, and even if they give 1 rupee each every year, that's $1 billion
Billion.
a year,
Right.
right? So yeah, I mean, I liked the story. It was, like one of the few rare ones from BBC, which was I didn't found biased.
Yeah, it was just nice to see something like this get highlighted, um, because it's true. Like a lot of the, like, what happens is, if you, especially like I grew up in a Hindu household, right? So it's always like, okay, now you're getting your first paycheck, this much for God, which will probably go to a temple, and then this much for, some sort of a philanthropic activity. And then, there's always that type of a, it's just a value system. It's kind of inbuilt into you that take some take some amount, whatever you can, and try to put it to a philanthropic cause, regardless of what income strata you end up in. And I think that's what this article is trying to highlight. But I also genuinely think that you are seeing this percolate partly because cost of living is lower. In the West, you just don't see that, just because everything has gotten crazy expensive, right? Like, just from personal experience, right? It's been difficult since I moved to Canada to try and ensure that okay, I can put a small part of my salary towards some sort of a philanthropic cause, right? I guess now I'm getting to that point where okay, I may be able to start doing that soon again. But again, it's tough. Like when you're paying, I mean, in Canada, the mnemonic is 50% goes in salary. I don't know if I totally agree in that. Like 50% goes in tax. I don't know if I entirely agree with that. I think it's just become more of an urban myth. But still, taxes are high and a lot of it goes away. Now, the government has taken that responsibility on that okay, we will redistribute the wealth, and that's why they take so much taxes from us, and we can only hope that they are actually doing that. And again, that'll in terms of Canada, that'll take me off on a tangent. But yeah, overall very happy to see BBC reporting something like this. um, I think India remains one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. Consumption is a major component. A household consumption, as consumption expands over time, the segment of everyday giving is likely to evolve and potentially grow alongside it. That's the message I want to leave everyone with on this story. Um, Keep going, India. Keep at it. Keep growing. Yep. Bharat Mata ki jai.
Nice.
All right, guys, time for our last story of the day. And JD, you start this one because I have no idea what this is about.
Sure, yeah. So this is JD's Science Corner we are in now. So this is about a rocket that NASA has been developing for a while now. And by a while, I mean like a decade at least. So it's called Artemis II. And this is NASA's plan to revisit the moon, land some astronauts there, and that's basically like their return to moon mission. And this has been planned for decades now. It builds good brand value for US, for NASA, and it is a catchy headline and everybody likes it. But uh, there are some flaws to this which I'll get to. I just want to just highlight like what this actual mission would be. So on March 6th, they're going to be launching this Artemis 2 mission, and this is going to last between 9 and 10 days, taking NASA's spacecraft, Orion spacecraft, with commanders Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and mission specialist Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen. One of them, by the way, is Canadian. So you'll see the Canadian Space Agency is also involved in this, and the other three are American. I don't know which one is which one. We can probably look that up. But uh, the tricky thing about this is, so this is the positive side, right? Now I'll tell you about the negative side. So this whole platform is built on something called Space Launch System, SLS for short, right? And this has been in development for a while now. So I'm looking at the Wikipedia, and the project cost, right, of this rocket, I'm sure they're going to be more, right? But till now has been $31.6 billion. That's crazy, right? Cost per launch is $2.5 billion per launch. Okay, and I think they're gonna launch three and four because you can't get to the moon directly, right? You
Right.
first have to launch one rocket, test everything, then another rocket, circle around moon, then third rocket attempt the landing, things like that. That's how the Apollo missions also happened. But now people are laughing at this, calling SLS not a space launch system but Senate launch system because this has been propped up by senators in the US because this provides a lot of jobs to their district. and they don't want to kill it. This is very over budget and like very inefficient way of building. The rockets they're building use mostly the same technology as from the Apollo mission, which is 30 years old. So it's just like, in my view, it's like a lot of money is just being thrown at a problem that do we really need? So yeah, that's why I found this story very interesting. I would love to know your thoughts, Abhijit.
I mean, what I feel is I'm not sure why NASA wants to now put astronauts on the moon again. Because NASA is a government agency, they are getting, senators to do, or they're feeling the pressure from the senators, maybe. Now, be that as it may, this cost number, I basically don't have another benchmark, right? NASA, whatever the Russian equivalent is, and then maybe the Chinese. I'm not sure, but I know US and Russia are the only ones who have been able to send people into space. No one else has been able to do it. USSR was obviously everything centrally planned, so it was funded and managed by their government. NASA is also a government agency. The gap is that there is no private company, private benchmark to even compare costs to. You would expect the private companies like SpaceX to be able to do this in much cheaper, right? But the fact of the matter is, Elon has not been able to send any human being into space. That's the harsh reality. Like the Falcon rockets, state of the art, amazing, lovely to see the reusable rocket coming down, being caught by those arms. Lovely technology, amazing technology, does not carry people, right? I don't know if it has. I think it has only gone up to the space station, not necessarily all the way to the moon yet, right? Now the second thing is you could have a space agency in the east. ISRO is known to have very cost efficient launches, but again, no person on the moon yet. I don't even know if ISRO has sent people to the space station yet, right? I think everyone ends up using the US infrastructure for this kind of stuff. I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not too glued into this space, right? So when everyone says this 31 billion and then 2.5 billion per launch is overpriced, I'm like, overpriced compared to what? Do you have another benchmark? Has anyone else even gotten close to it? If they have gotten close to it, even if they have failed, how much was their cost? But the second thing is, okay, what do you want to get more from sending people to the moon? I think we have explored quite a bit of the moon surface. I'm not saying we couldn't do more. I don't know if there is a value proposition on this, which has come directly from NASA rather than an encouragement from politicians. Um, I think it's. I think this is more. This is. It's kind of like the AI race these days, right? There was a space race before, then it died down because it just got too expensive, and then sending satellites that could capture images and do more efficient flybys just became more economical. I think US as a part of this project is trying to. I think there's a hidden aim, or there's a hidden purpose for this mission. It's to try and see how effectively can the US start building, a space force sort of a thing, right? The next frontier of all quote unquote conflict will be the space. Now, if this is still using the technology that was used in the Apollo missions, I don't know. I mean, Has there literally been no innovation in this space since for like what 30 years? That to me is a bit surprising. I think there are more layers to this onion than what we are being told, right? When I read the story as a standalone, I feel okay, this seems ridiculous. But I also think that since the Department of Defense is now called Department of War, they need to show something as far as their KPIs are concerned. And a part of that is okay, where are we with technology when it comes to establishing some sort of a space force? That's my 2 cents to this. Otherwise, the money doesn't make sense. But the money is also, there's no other benchmark. Like I'm like, okay, it costs NASA 31 billion. Okay, can anyone do it in lesser? We don't know.
Yeah. I mean, uh, to give you like some numbers, like, I mean, I just looked this up. So maybe this provides some clues as to why other people are not doing it. So, how much did the Apollo program cost to the US, right? So, the US spent $25 billion between 1960 and 1973, right? So, $25 billion in 1970s money. So, that is around $280 billion in today's money. So that is the amount you need to spend to send humans to moon. Now, I was looking up the cost comparison between these different rocket vehicles, right? So SLS, which NASA is trying to send to the moon, is around 2 to 3 billion dollar per launch, right? Falcon Heavy, that's a comparable rocket by SpaceX. That's around 100 million per launch. So that is the, what do you say, the
Big
difference
differential.
in the price, right? ISRO is cheaper. ISRO is around 20 to 30 million a year, but it doesn't carry humans. So I guess this kind of number gives you a sense to why nobody else is doing this, because it's too expensive, right? And also in the end, what are we getting? We're getting just a bunch of humans on moon. Well, why are we sending humans to the moon? We have AI, we have robots. Send them. We don't, they don't have to wear like the astronaut uniforms or spacesuits. They can just be out there, wearing on their robot body, getting bombarded by radiation. We don't care. But another thing important is, why is it so expensive? Is because of the human element. Because we are sending humans to the moon, it comes with additional cost like pressurized environments, spacesuits. Because the last thing you want as a director of this mission is someone dies. That doesn't look good. So you'll spend double or triple the amount of money to make sure it never happens. I mean, we've heard of a lot about Kalpana Chawla, right? That
Colombia.
Challenger mission that
Colombia,
failed.
Colombia.
Columbia mission that failed while coming down. I think after that, that was the last or the second last mission. Then they retired it because they were like, yeah, it's not safe or not insurable, right? So I think, yeah, that is where we are right now. I hope personally that they shut this down. It's like a money sink. Use this $20 billion to invest in startups that can send robots to outer space. That would be way more helpful. But again, it's we're talking about the Senate, human Senate, and Congress. So I doubt they're going to do anything if somebody wants to snatch us out money from their district.
I mean, that's how NASA is in a very tricky position, right? They are, at the end of the day, their aim is to be a science aerospace driven agency, but they can't, but they are funded by the government. They'll have to listen. If there is too much support for or if there's adequate support from Senate or Congress to make human missions or to carry out human missions again, they won't have much of a choice. And as I was saying that there is more to this story than just, oh, let's start sending people to the moon again. I think there is a different purpose. That purpose will not be revealed to the public, simply because this will be more of a question of national security for the US as they see it. So this will come out, maybe 20 years later in some sort of a documentary that, oh, remember the Artemis II missions? They were not simply about putting men on the moon again. Or people on the moon again. They were more about, XYZ, whatever that XYZ comes out, right? And this has happened before. Like, there was one massive, so long back, a US submarine went underground, sank. And this was, I think, during the Cold War era. So the Americans wanted to get to that submarine to get all the Soviet technology. Now, the Soviets were not looking in the right place for it. So ultimately, it's said that CIA planned with Baker. Who was that guy in Aviator? That movie was made on Aviator. Howard Hughes, right?
Howard Hughes,
So
yep.
with his company, they planned a whole mission to try and lift that submarine out of the ocean bed, and they disguised it as an oil exploration exercise. And yeah, they were able to recover a part of that submarine. I don't know, we'll never know what they got out of that, what they didn't get out of that. um, some the story says that, okay, the missiles that the Americans wanted to look at, that section of the submarine did not come out just because there was a problem with the mechanism that was going to lift that submarine out. Again, we'll never know the full extent of such stories, but I just can't think it's as simple as, okay, let's put people on the moon again. I I think NASA already knew the cost. Like, they've done this before. And all it takes to try and figure out what it would cost today is to apply an inflationary multiple, which is, I mean, for a NASA scientist, that's basically an exercise in the head. It's not even, they don't even need an Excel spreadsheet to do that, probably. So I think there will be more to come out on this. And we will see that maybe in a few years, not even as these missions happen. So yeah, that's my take. All right, guys, I think time to wrap this up. Hope you guys enjoyed our episode. Hope you guys like our rebranding on this channel. Please do like, share, and subscribe, and spread the news. Till then, see you guys next week. Have a great rest of the weekend.
See ya. Bye.